Gaze upon our world, a tapestry woven from a billion digital threads, each one a pixel, a whisper of data, a connection. We navigate oceans of information with a flick of a finger, command vast networks from the palm of our hand. Our reality, in many ways, is defined by the intimate, ubiquitous presence of the personal computer. But what if this cornerstone of the modern age never quite took root? What if the year 2000 arrived, not with the triumph of silicon for every home, but with a different hum, a different clatter? Imagine for a moment a world parallel to our own, where the digital revolution stalled at the threshold of the individual. A reality where the personal computer, that unassuming gateway to infinite possibilities, remained an expensive, specialized tool, confined to the corporate leviathans, the government strongholds, the hushed sanctums of academia. What then of our collective destiny? What shape would the new millennium have taken, devoid of the intimate digital companionship we now take for granted? This is not a world of retrofuturism, but a serious exploration into a profoundly different present, a present crafted by the absence of a single pivotal innovation. The historical currents, so seemingly immutable, would have been irrevocably altered. The late 20th century, rather than culminating in the dot-com boom and its subsequent necessary bust, would have witnessed a more measured, perhaps stolid economic growth. The wild speculation, the explosive creation of entirely new industries built upon the promise of universal digital access simply wouldn't occur. Companies like Amazon, Google, and even Apple, in its modern iteration, would either be embryonic, niche players catering to institutional clients, or fundamentally different entities altogether. Financial markets, devoid of the instant, algorithmic trading and global interconnectivity we know, would be slower, more human-centric, perhaps more prone to traditional recessions than flash crashes. The information age, as we understand it, would arrive, but heavily centralized. Governments and large corporations would control vast databanks, accessible only through dedicated, secure terminals. This concentration of information would fundamentally reshape global power dynamics. Intelligence agencies, rather than grappling with the complexities of cyber warfare and global data valence, would double down on human intelligence, physical infiltration, and the control of key communication choke points. Espionage would retain a more classic, cloak-and-dagger flavor, valuing encrypted physical documents and highly trained operatives over digital exploits. Even revolutions and social movements would follow different pathways. The Arab Spring, powered in our timeline by social media and instant distributed communication, would struggle for coordination. Instead, mass movements would rely on traditional media, radio, television, underground presses, and the slow, methodical work of physical organization, clandestine meetings, and word-of-mouth networks. The velocity of change would be dramatically reduced, making top-down control potentially more enduring. Globalization itself would proceed at a more deliberate pace, fueled by physical shipping and increasingly sophisticated but still analog logistics, rather than the seamless flow of digital trade and instant financial transactions across continents. Economic powers would still rise and fall, but the tectonic shifts would be driven by industrial might, resource control, and established trade routes, not by digital innovation. The very concept of a global village would remain a distant, philosophical ideal, not a lived reality. In this alternate reality, computing still advances, but along a divergent path. Mainframes and powerful mini-computers remain the titans of the digital world. Vast, climate-controlled server halls the size of aircraft hangars hum with the power of processing. Computing is not a personal tool, but a utility, like electricity or water, supplied by massive, specialized corporations or government agencies. Think of it as a highly sophisticated public computing grid, not a network of individual devices. Innovation would pivot towards maximizing the efficiency and accessibility of these centralized systems. We might see the rise of ubiquitous public access terminals, advanced secure workstations strategically placed in libraries, post offices, and specially designated information kiosks in public squares. These terminals would offer limited, monitored access to information, allowing citizens to check government records, apply for permits, or access heavily curated news feeds. Their interfaces would be robust, designed for public interaction, perhaps utilizing voice commands or specialized biometric authentication, but always linked to a distant, humming central brain. Data storage would lean heavily into high-capacity optical disks or even advanced robotic tape libraries for archival purposes. The cloud, as we know it, would be a literal physical place, a secure data center where information is stored and retrieved on demand, perhaps even delivered physically via secure couriers on optical media for complex tasks. Wireless communication would exist, but primarily for voice, with rudimentary data capabilities, possibly specialized teleprinter phones for corporations, acting more like mobile fax machines than modern smartphones. The absence of the personal computer would also reshape scientific discovery. Collaboration would be slower, more reliant on physical meetings, shared laboratories, and the exchange of physical data tapes or disks. Complex simulations would require booking time on supercomputers, making access a privilege, not a given. This could lead to a greater emphasis on theoretical physics and experimental observation as computational modeling becomes a bottleneck. We might see advancements in robotics that automate tasks traditionally handled by human data entry or calculation, creating a more mechanized form of digital interaction, where physical robots interface with the centralized mainframes. Perhaps even a resurgence of complex analog computers for specific scientific tasks, working in tandem with the massive digital brains. The ingenuity would not diminish, merely redirect, creating strange, beautiful, and profoundly powerful machines that hum and click in their own majestic rhythm, serving humanity from afar. Life in this parallel 2000s would feel strangely familiar, yet profoundly different. The rhythm of daily existence would be slower, more deliberate. Without personal computers, the home would remain a sanctuary largely free of screens, save for the television and perhaps specialized entertainment consoles that operate offline. Evening hours would be dedicated to conversation, reading physical books, board games, or community events. The constant digital hum of notifications, the lure of an infinite scroll, would be absent, replaced by a different kind of quiet. Workplaces would retain a more hierarchical, centralized structure. Data entry, filing, and physical information management would be massive professions. Information clerks, archivists, and teleprinter operators would be key figures in every office, possessing specialized skills in managing the flow of physical and limited digital data. The concept of telework would be almost non-existent, tying people to their physical offices and fostering a stronger sense of local community, but also potentially limiting personal freedom and global mobility. Commuting, face-to-face meetings, and physical presence would be paramount. Education would emphasize memorization, critical thinking through extensive reading of physical texts, and the art of physical research in libraries, which would thrive as vibrant, essential hubs of knowledge. The ability to navigate vast physical archives and cross-reference information manually would be a highly valued skill. Language itself would be subtly different. Internet slang, text speak, and the rapid evolution of memes would never materialize. Communication would lean towards more formal, perhaps more elaborate prose, honed by the slower pace of written correspondence and face-to-face interaction. Entertainment would be largely physical and communal. Television, radio, cinema, and dedicated gaming consoles without online multiplayer would dominate. Live music, theater, and public gatherings would hold even greater cultural significance. The concept of viral concept would be alien. Cultural trends would spread organically through word of mouth, physical media distribution, and traditional broadcast channels, taking weeks or months to sweep across nations. Privacy concerns would shift from digital surveillance to more traditional forms of monitoring, but the sheer volume of personal data collected and analyzed would be significantly less. Individual digital footprints would be fragmented, tied to specific public terminals or corporate accounts, making comprehensive profiling much harder. This would be a world where tangible connections, a handshake, a shared meal, a handwritten letter, would carry immense weight,
perhaps fostering a deeper, if more localized, sense of human connection.
The global chessboard, without the personal computer's influence, would present a dramatically different landscape of power. The rise of tech giants as the wealthiest and most influential corporations would never materialize. Instead, the behemoths would remain industrial conglomerates, media empires, logistics powerhouses, and, crucially, information brokers, companies or state-controlled entities that own and operate the vast mainframe networks and public terminal infrastructures. These information brokers would wield immense power, controlling access to vital data, economic forecasts, and even public communication channels. Nations that successfully develop and secure their own national computing grids would possess a critical strategic advantage. Economic systems would revert to a more traditional model of capitalism, with less emphasis on the intangible assets of data and software. Manufacturing, resource extraction, and complex supply chain management would be the primary drivers of wealth. Countries with strong industrial bases, abundant natural resources, and effective logistical networks would maintain or even consolidate their geopolitical dominance. The global north would still largely lead, but perhaps challenged by emerging industrial powers rather than burgeoning digital economies. International alliances and conflicts would be less about cyber espionage and more about the control of physical resources, traditional trade routes, and strategic geographical points. The threat of a data shutdown would replace the fear of a cyber attack, where one nation could potentially cripple another by severing access to its main computing grid. Surveillance, while still pervasive, would be more reliant on human intelligence, physical monitoring, and the interception of traditional communications, creating a world where secrets are harder to digitally steal, but perhaps easier to physically uncover. The digital divide in this reality would be a chasm. Nations lacking the immense resources to build and maintain sophisticated mainframe infrastructures would be severely disadvantaged, isolated from the world's most critical information flows. Their citizens would remain largely disconnected from global knowledge, relying on slower, less efficient communication. This would create a new kind of global stratification, separating the info-rich from the info-poor, reinforcing existing inequalities rather than offering the democratizing potential of widely distributed digital access. The world might be more fragmented, with regional blocs holding greater sway, and the dream of a globally interconnected society remaining precisely that, a dream.
The titans of our timeline, individuals like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, would either fade into obscurity or find their genius redirected into vastly different endeavors. Steve Jobs, with his legendary aesthetic vision and consumer focus, might have revolutionized home entertainment systems, creating exquisitely designed offline media hubs, or perhaps transforming industrial design itself. His Apple might still exist, but as a purveyor of high-end, specialized analog-digital hybrids, beautiful but functionally limited. Bill Gates, a master of software architecture, would likely still be a titan, but his empire, Microsoft, would be built on intricate, robust operating systems for corporate mainframes, industrial automation, and government networks. The concept of Windows for every home would be alien. His products would be expensive, complex, and invisible to the average consumer. Mark Zuckerberg, the architect of our social digital existence, would likely never achieve global recognition. Without the widespread adoption of personal computers and internet access, the very foundation for platforms like Facebook simply wouldn't exist. He might be an innovator in local community networking, perhaps developing advanced bulletin board systems or specialized communication interfaces for public terminals. Tim Berners-Lee's World Wide Web would remain a brilliant academic construct, a tool for researchers and institutions, never democratized into the pervasive information layer we know. Instead, this world would herald new kinds of influential figures. We might see the rise of master librarians, revered individuals who possess encyclopedic knowledge and unparalleled skill in navigating the physical and limited digital information repositories. Information brokers would emerge, not as data miners, but as powerful gatekeepers, owning and curating access to crucial digital databases, much like feudal lords controlled land. We might have teleprinter scribes, highly skilled individuals adept at rapidly processing and transmitting data through complex, dedicated networks. The individuals who could efficiently access, synthesize, and disseminate information through the limited channels available would become the new intellectual and economic elite. Their influence would stem not from creating viral content, but from their expertise in navigating a vast, slow, and physical information landscape, guiding others through its complex channels. So, we return to the quiet hum, the distant clatter, a world that chose a different path, where the microchip never found its way into every home, every pocket. It is a world slower, perhaps more tangible, its connections built on physical presence and deliberate communication. The cacophony of constant notifications is replaced by the rustle of paper, the quiet hum of distant machinery. Privacy, though threatened, takes on a different form, less about digital data trails and more about the boundaries of physical space. What lessons does this alternate reality offer? Perhaps a sobering reflection on the sheer power of a single technological trajectory. The personal computer, a device so ubiquitous it often disappears into the fabric of our lives, reshaped not just how we work and play, but how we think, how we connect, how we understand ourselves and our place in the global tapestry. In its absence, humanity's journey would have been one of slower enlightenment, more centralized power, and perhaps a deeper, if more localized, sense of community.
This imagined world reminds us that our present is not inevitable. It is the culmination of countless choices, countless innovations, countless turns in the river of time. The personal computer was not merely a device, it was a catalyst, a democratizer of information, a forge of new realities. And without it, we glimpse a world less connected, less instantly informed, where the byte was king, but the individual byte remained a distant, elusive subject. A world forever echoing with the majestic, yet isolated hum of the central machine, rather than the billion whispers of a truly personal digital age.